Good evening, priesthood of believers. This evening we will be discussing Paul Bourget, who was a notable French novelist, critic, and essayist who was born in 1852 and passed away in 1935. He was known for the significant role and contribution he made to the literary scenes of late 19th and early 20th century France. He was born on September 2nd in Amiens, France. He was raised in an intellectual environment, most likely due to the fact that his father was a mathematics professor. He studied at the Lycée Louis le Grand in Paris, where he developed an interest in literature and philosophy. Due to this, he pursued a literary career. Makes sense, right? He initially gained recognition as a poet, mainly due to his collections in 1875, known as La Vie Inquiète, and Edel in 1878. He eventually shifted to prose, where he found much greater success, especially focusing on psychological novels and essays, often with hints or elements of philosophy or social commentary. He also, in 1883, produced Essays on Contemporary Psychology, which was a collection of essays analyzing contemporary writers, which also established his reputation as a literary critic. It's important to understand that Paul, growing up in France, naturally had a Catholic background. However, due to his upbringing, especially due to the rise in secularism and the undercurrent of secularism, particularly in France post-French Revolution, he moved away from his Catholic faith and became an atheist. However, as time went on, especially due to moral, philosophical, ethical issues, especially with the philosophy of that time, led to a turnaround where he eventually returned to the Christian faith. Why is that? Well, couple reasons. If you look at this time frame, he wrote a book in 1889 known as The Disciple. It was a key novel in his literary repertoire, which was a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked intellectualism. Now, why would intellectualism, especially unchecked, be an issue? Well, devoid of Christianity, it leads to some pretty crazy stuff. One of those is positivism or scientific determinism. Both of these are related to one another, especially moving towards relativism, especially postmodernism, which we see in our society today. So what is positivism? Well, it is essentially a form of philosophical thinking that was founded by Auguste Comte, or if you want to pronounce it as we Americans do, Auguste Comte, who was a 19th century French thinker. He was essentially dissatisfied with the theological and philosophical views of metaphysics and instead turned to sociology. Essentially what he did is he broke down human evolution into three stages, where in its infancy, right, no backhanded slap there at all, the focus of philosophy is theological in nature. Then, once human evolution or society reaches its adolescence, it focuses on philosophy. However, adulthood is where empirical science alone is used to comprehend reality. As you can see where this is going, positivism expanded upon these theories, essentially saying that everything needs to be understood scientifically and that it has to have some sort of empirically verifiable aspect to it. Otherwise, if the senses cannot test it, we can have no knowledge of it. The irony of this type of philosophy is that if the maxim, the ideal principle of this philosophy is that everything has to be empirically verifiable, otherwise it cannot be known or true, this maxim itself is unable to be tested empirically. There is no way for the five senses to verify it in and of itself, which is ironic because that is what he upheld as the ultimate or the adulthood of human society, and that is what positivism pursues. Likewise, when it comes to scientific determinism, essentially if you want to understand this, because it can be somewhat complex, determinism basically means that through a process of like chain cause and effect, regardless of what happens, something is set to occur in response. There's nothing you can do to change it. It's almost as if you want to think about like the original idea of predestination, that God already chooses people to go to heaven, and you have no way, shape, or form a say in it. That is what scientific determinism is. Hawking himself basically states that, if we can develop a unifying force for physics and the universe as a whole, then we should be able to, through physics, predict everything that is going to happen. So that is essentially what determinism is. It is, to a certain extent, quite devoid of theological reasoning or input, because as we discussed when it comes to the previous positivism, right? If it can't be tested, it is not true, which is their method specifically in secular society of removing any type of argument from a theological foundation or standpoint. So essentially, when Bourget wrote The Disciple, right, he still had not returned to the Christian faith, but was on the path to identifying that his life was devoid of something that was important and needed. He used this book hoping that it would be an analytical and educational tool for the future generations, which if you read or listen to the foreword, you will understand. But he criticizes the role of intellectuals and essentially accuses modern science of replacing religion without offering any type of moral compass, without being able to guide ethically and morally the masses, which is an important thing to think about and a key takeaway of his book. In 1890, he returned to the Christian faith through Catholicism. He experienced a significant religious transformation and shifted the form of his writing, right? Whereas before, it focused on poetry and critiquing literary works and everything like that, he started to incorporate or infuse religious and moral themes. And one of the best examples of this is in 1914, his novel, The Midday Demon, explores the struggles of faith and temptation, illustrating his deepening religious conviction. His conversion, for the most part, was influenced by disillusionment with the secular and materialistic values of his time, and found solace and meaning in the traditions of his ancestors. He is known for having left a lasting impact on French literature through his exploration of psychological, moral, and religious themes. Additionally, his works, both fictional and critical, remain studied for their insightful analysis of human nature, society, and spirituality. He oftentimes sparked intellectual debates due to his works, but more often than not, he found himself aligning with conservative viewpoints later in his career, and in fact, doing his best to incorporate moral values into the younger generations to get them thinking about the past, the present, and the future, realizing that the laymen had a key role in the future of France, particularly in their form of a republic. With that said, please like and subscribe and follow for more media that we are publishing. Specifically, as it relates to Paul Bourget, we will go through the introduction and explain more about The Disciple.